Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my friend, and welcome to this episode of the Confident Fiction Author Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and today I want to talk about something kind of fun, and it may also be a question that you've asked yourself, or if you're an established fiction author, maybe other people have asked you, and you don't quite know what the answer is. And that question is, what is the ideal age to become a fiction author? I know a lot of you in my audience are already past retirement, and then I have a lot of you who are moms, and then I have some who are young writers just getting into life and wanting to explore fiction. So I have worked with authors of all different ages, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to tackle this question, because I have heard it come up. I have had authors wonder, am I too old or am I too young to start pursuing fiction writing? So let me just say when I started. I was 5 years old when I wrote my first piece of fiction. Yes, I was homeschooled, and I think I always had a love for story and words, but whenever I was a little girl, I had this idea for a story, and I was so shy, I knew I would never be able to actually say it. Like when the doorbell rang, I would run and hide behind my mama's skirt. So I was very shy, and I just had this story in my heart, though, that was burning, and I wanted to share it. It was a story about kindness, about a little girl who gives a teddy bear to this boy who's sad out in her neighborhood street. So not that I ever did that, but I would. If I had had the courage, I would have done that. But I just wanted to share a story about being kind to other people. And so my mama, she gave me this, little pack of sticky notes, and I wrote on like one sentence per sticky note. And I say sentence, give me some grace. I was 5, so there were missing words. Probably nothing was spelled right. But I wrote it, and I did about 5 sentences. And that was my first piece of fiction. My brother, then my mom took it and had me recopy it, encouraged me to recopy it. And my brother, who was 7 at the time, he illustrated it. And my mama, thankfully, bless her, she saved that. So that was my very first story that I ever wrote. And I was 5 years old when I did it. Now, if you did not start when you were very, very young or even a teenager, I didn't write all the way through childhood, but I did keep writing stories and all the way through my teen years and all. But if you didn't start there, I have another story for you. When I published my first book, it's called Touch My Tears, Tales from the Trail of Tears, I did it through a program that I was in with the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, and the end result of that program was to bring everything that I had learned from my studies in D.C. for 2 weeks, from archives, and anyway, it was an incredible program. But I brought it back to my community in Durant, Oklahoma, so I do live in Texas, but that's one of the communities that I work in Choctaw Nation. So I brought it back and invited other Choctaw tribal members to come to a fiction writing workshop, where we went over, how do you take cultural material and stories and artifacts and put them into fiction to preserve them. So I had authors come from 5 different states. It was incredible. The ones who came from the furthest, though, was a pair of sisters, and they came all the way from, I think it was North Carolina and Tennessee. It was the East Coast there. They drove out there together all the way to Oklahoma, and they were 89 and 91 years old when they came to my workshop. And neither of them had ever written fiction. They had written some nonfiction, like a lot of people do throughout their adult life. At some point, they write something, some kind of article or something that maybe even got published, but they had done a little bit of that, but they had never written fiction. And so they came to my workshop, and I invited at the end of the workshop for anyone to submit to the anthology that I was creating, and both of them did. So I had like a 3-month deadline or something for people to write their short story and get it into me, just a first draft, and then we would edit it. So Miss Jerry, who was 91 years old, she sent me her story handwritten on sheets of paper. She had recopied it and she sent it to me by mail. And that was her first piece of fiction. I read it and I was like, this is actually really good. So we're definitely including this. And her sister did as well. I think she emailed me her story. And so I took both of their stories. We did some editing and I was like, this is wonderful, ladies. Like, we are going to put this in the book. And so both of their stories went into my Touch My Tears anthology. And actually, the majority of the authors in that collection were 70 plus years old. And for, I think, pretty much all of them, except for maybe one or two of the authors, had never written fiction before. So regardless of what age you are currently, if you're very, very young, I don't think I have any 5-year-olds listening, but if you're very young, or if you're in that older generation or anywhere in between, I have a story for you of someone in your age bracket who became a fiction author. So let's go ahead and get into talking about some of these ways that, or why this question is prominent, and let's just bust some myths about what the ideal age is for you to get started in fiction writing. That way, even if it's not a question you're asking yourself, you may have someone come up to you at a writing conference or at a book signing, and they're anxious to do fiction writing, but they're not sure if they're too young or they're too old to get started. So let's get into some of those. All right, so first we have the, quote, right time illusion. There always seems to be a right time to do something, to go to college or get into creative fields. So I think society, especially today, emphasizes youth going into creative fields, and that is wonderful. I taught at the Chickasaw Arts Academy for several years. I taught creative writing and loved working with the kids and seeing their youthful expressions and their energy that they bring into it. One thing we have to remember, though, so that's kind of what society leans on a lot. One thing to remember is that fiction thrives on life experience, and wisdom deepens storytelling. That's something I have seen with authors who are older and they're getting started with fiction writing, is they're bringing this depth to it that when I read their stories, I'm like, it does have a freshness to it because they are able to draw from all of these life experiences and the things that they've personally been through or their family has been through, or just the world events that they have lived through. And to see that expression come through in the writing, even if their craft isn't well developed, it needs some work, it needs some honing and some practice. That needs to take place regardless of your age. But there's always that depth to it, and just those turns of phrases that really hit the point in a way that I have not heard before. And I'm like, wow, there's some richness here to people who are older and they're entering fiction for the first time. I also have a lot of writers that they have been writing fiction for decades and they're now older. And so you have even a different voice from that. But whenever an author who is older and they're coming into it for the first time, there's just a freshness there that it's uncensored and it's raw and it's real, and it's just, you can feel all of those years coming through their stories. So I think often older writers can really share their stories in a heartfelt way. And one of the things I loved about the two ladies, and really all of the older authors who were in my collection, is I just really admired their courage to try something new. I mean, it was incredible to see people who had never written fiction before just step out there, and they just had this joy and this sense of accomplishment. And oh my goodness, their family and their communities just loved it. They loved that they were venturing into this new medium of writing fiction and telling stories in that way. And I just really admired how courageous they were in doing that, because we know as fiction authors, and you've probably felt this at some point, and that's why we talk about the confident fiction author. A lot of times we don't have that confidence. We're like, oh, this is hard, and it's, creating characters and plots, and they just take over your brain. And, how do I form these sentences? How do I convey this in a way that's not stereotypical and it's not just these overused words? And, how do I convey this story? And to see people who are 70, 80, 90 years old to just step into it and like, this is what I'm here for. And for my authors, especially with this collection, they, I think, drew up the courage to step into writing fiction because they wanted to be a part of this collection. They wanted to be a part of sharing their ancestors' stories and preserving them and putting them out there so that their family could read them for the first time. I know that was something Miss Jerry shared, where she's like, I'm the last one in my family who really knows these Choctaw stories, and I need to get them written. So it was incredibly inspiring. And if you get a chance, I do give that book away for free as an ebook over on my author website, or my reader website. I guess it'd be my author website. So me as an author, this is me as a teacher here, fictioncourses.com, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer. But as an author, you can go to my site, Sarah Elizabeth Writes, and that's Sarah with an H, Elizabeth with an S, not a Z, and then Writes, WRITES.com. And you can get a free e-copy of my book, Touch My Tears, Tales from the Trail of Tears, if you're interested in that. So just a quick side note. But that's what I love about seeing authors. We, as a society, we often look at the youth and really uplifting the youth and giving them the tools and resources to enter creative fields. And I 100% support that. I've been involved in many youth endeavors and programs. And I just also want to acknowledge the older generation as well, and giving them resources in being able to step into writing fiction for the first time. So I love that. I love that I've been able to tell stories and be a fiction writer since I was 5, and I will be turning 40 this year. So it's been some decades for me, if you count all of it. And I'm grateful that I did start young, and that I did have that courage and that encouragement from my mom, from my family, to express my stories, start writing them. And I did have an advantage of starting young and being able to learn craft and spend those years just exploring story. And my imagination was just really unhindered from life and life experiences, and really being able to imagine all of the possibilities. And so I have been able to look back now over, I guess I could say, 3 decades of writing, of how my writing has evolved and how I've evolved as a person, and how it has grown, and how my author voice has developed over the years. And that all of that came with its own lessons. And so there are definitely unique challenges that young writers can face, like imposter syndrome and just having that lack of experience. So I went through those different phases, and those are unique challenges to overcome when you're a young writer. So older writers can also face those same things, that imposter syndrome, and it's not so much lack of life experience, but lack of fiction writing experience that they're having to overcome. So that is the same regardless of what age people are coming into fiction writing. So what actually matters in becoming a fiction author? It is really about the courage to step into it, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 91-year-old. It takes courage to put those first words of fiction down on the page. So when you're young, you potentially have more energy, you feel more freedom to experiment, and you have that time to grow. And if you're older, you have that perspective and that patience and just that powerful legacy of all the years that you've lived that you can pour into a story. And so what really matters isn't the age, it's a matter of having that courage to step into it and get started. And so that's what I want to do for you today. If you are that fiction author who is just starting out, you are listening to this podcast, the Confident Fiction Author Podcast, because you're wondering if you're too old or too young to get started, and how can you have the confidence to step into your fiction writing, or maybe you're mentoring someone who is in that place and they're wondering. And I just want to say, wherever you are right now, whether you're working with that 5-year-old or you're that 91-year-old, now is the perfect time to start writing. I just want to encourage you to share with whoever you're mentoring to take that one step today. Open a document on your computer, open your notes on your phone if you want, and just write one scene. Just get a story started. It can be just 5 sentences like I did with my first story. Just writing something, some piece of fiction to get yourself into that world of fiction writing. And then I encourage you, join a writing group or a community, or submit a story to a fiction writing contest. Just start putting your work out there and getting around fellow fiction writers of all ages, because regardless of the age, we are all learning from each other when it comes to crafting characters and developing plots and all of the things that go into being a fiction author. On that note, I do invite you to come over to my Substack community. So I have a fictioncourses.com Substack community that's actually at fictioncourses.substack.com. I have all of the podcast episodes on there. You can read the transcripts if you'd like, go back through and highlight any points. And you can also drop a comment on this episode and let me know, if you're an experienced fiction author, what age did you start and what was that like to get started in fiction writing at that age, whether you were a young child or if it came later in life, or if you're just getting started with your fiction writing. Do drop a comment. I will come in there and encourage you on your journey and in taking those first steps. You can subscribe for free to my Substack there. You can also upgrade. I have a special paid community that you can come into, and we really focus on dictation. So if you're just getting started with fiction writing, I have a lot of people who they just getting into writing fiction for the first time, and they want to start off with dictating. They want to go ahead and train themselves to dictate so that they can just do that from the very beginning. So I have my 5-minute fiction club there on Substack as the upgrade community. So I do invite you to come into there as well and use that habit, that 5-minute habit, to develop yourself as a fiction author, regardless of your age. All right, so wrapping up here, I just want to say that the ideal age to become a fiction writer is not about the number, it's about the moment you decide to begin. Oh, and one final note. I know I talked a lot about teaching my Choctaw authors fiction. They were just getting started, many of them, and they went into that collection, Touch My Tears. I've now developed a digital course for all authors, so it is specifically designed for fiction authors who want to accurately and respectfully include Native American characters in their stories. So if that's you, I invite you to check that course out. It's over at fictioncourses.com/American Indians. I also have a free resource on there, a little short PDF called 5 Stereotypes to Avoid When Writing About Native Americans. So you can get that over at fictioncourses.com. That's it for this episode, my friend. I will see you next time on the Confident Fiction Author podcast. Take care.